share about 5 minutes worth of comments with us, and then we'll move down the table from there. And I'll do an introduction, and we'll take each speaker from there. So, Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone was sworn into office on January 1st of 2012 as the county executive. He is the 8th county executive in the history of Suffolk County, and had previously served as the Babylon Town Supervisor. Yeah, I will offer one additional comment, which is to say that one thing that jumped out at me in observing the county executive over the last several years is that in an unprecedented fashion in 2014, his State of the County address was, I don't know if exclusively is a fair word, but it was almost entirely focused on the issue of water quality. So oftentimes when I sit down with folks who are either elected or appointed officials, my first task is to convince them that the thing that I have brought before them as an issue is in fact an issue that they should care about. So we have with us today a county executive who understands that this is an issue, and that allows us to get right into, that's great, what are we going to do to solve these problems? So with that, welcome to you. We have a wireless for you, just so that the camera can pick it up.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Jeremy. And I hopefully just stole an extra minute by cutting my bio short. And I will not be talking about myself at all. So it's great to be here. This is such a vitally important issue. I'll get right into it. Sorry, did I do that? You can make me jump.
There you go.
Oh. It's great to be here. First, before I jump into my comments, I want to say a couple of things about what I've seen here. I want to thank the Sir Private Foundation as well. The importance of planning. And it's great to be here with Supervisor Cantwell and Supervisor Holst. I've worked very closely with them on the water quality issue, and they've shown great leadership, and it's very good to be here with both of them and my colleague in the legislature, Jay Schneiderman, who can speak probably a lot better than I can on most of these issues, and Bridget Fleming from the town of Southampton work very closely together. So planning is vitally important. We just missed having a hurricane. Last couple of days we've been prepping for a hurricane. Thankfully it's turning this way instead of turning this way. Of course, we don't know when that may happen again. The worst time to actually be deciding what you should do is after the hurricane has just happened. So to bounce off the comments that Jeremy made, you know, communities that do planning, and that's why it's so great to see what's happening here on the East End and the planning that's happening here. Coming together to build a consensus about what you should be doing moving forward when something does happen. When you have that plan laid out in advance, you actually have the ability to do something really significant, really important. The natural instinct that Jeremy said is to build back just as you were if you haven't had any planning done prior to the hurricane. That's a natural human instinct. We are all, nostalgic human beings, right? That's why we listen to the music that we grew up with. You know, I'm listening to oldie stations now. I'm playing, anybody who's my generation, I'm playing the old Atari games. You can now buy those. And my kids are looking at me like, this is awful. What are you, these little blobs? Because we're nostalgic, right? We want to build back. But each generation has the right to determine, it should be determining what kind of place we need and need to have. The world is changing every day around us. And sometimes dramatic change happens like hurricanes. That's why the planning is so important. I can't think of a more important subject to be talking about than water quality, as Jeremy said. Back a couple of years ago, I declared that water quality would be the top priority of my administration. And again, there had been great work already happening with people like Jay Schneiderman working on this issue for a long time, Hannah Holst, Southampton. But I fundamentally believe there's nothing more important that we've been doing. Water is everything to us in this region. Literally, it's our quality of life, our heritage, our recreation. our economy. The water we drink is beneath our feet, and after Superstorm Sandy, we understand that water can be a threat to us as well. So if we're not protecting water quality, we are mortgaging our future. What is causing it? What is causing the water quality problems? By and large, what I've said is nitrogen is public water enemy number one. Nitrogen, nitrification. Where is that coming from? By and large, mostly it is coming from a lack of advanced wastewater treatment, a lack of sewering. We have 360,000 homes in Suffolk County without advanced wastewater treatment, without sewering. That is more homes that are unsewered in our county than in the entire state of New Jersey, just to give some perspective on it. It is a massive, massive problem. So we began to address that very quickly. We need infrastructure. So we made the coastal resiliency argument to the state of New York and to our federal partners after Sandy. What we said is we shouldn't just be hardening, we shouldn't just be putting in hard infrastructure, we should be restoring our natural systems. So we need funding for wastewater infrastructure because we need to restore coastal vegetation that has been decimated, devastated by our water quality problems. In order to restore coastal vegetation, to rebuild wetlands and seagrass and eelgrass and bring that back, we need to remediate the pollution that has been causing its decline. In order to remediate the pollution, we need infrastructure. That's why we were able to secure nearly $400 million to help advance the water quality infrastructure. That's the largest amount of water quality infrastructure we've had in 40 years in the region. Beyond that, we are working together. I can tell you with East Hampton, the town of Southampton, and Holst and Jay, we're working, and everyone on the East End, we're working to develop plans on how we address water quality. It is not one solution. It's not going to be just sewering. It's going to be a combination, a comprehensive effort, clustered systems, and advanced on-site systems. Now, when you're talking about advanced on-site systems, these are more expensive systems. Currently, we're working on new technologies. Supervisor Holst was successful working to get Stony Brook University to be an incubator, essentially working to develop these new technologies. But they are more expensive. There's no question about it. So I believe it is very important that we develop a system in which we are assisting homeowners in financing with potentially with grants to be able to make these systems work. Why? Because when you put this system on your property, when you put an advanced system, not just a typical septic and cesspool, when you put an advanced system in, you are doing something not only for yourself, for your property, you are certainly doing something to add value to your property, but you are also adding value to the region as a whole. You are helping to mitigate the damage that is occurring across the region to our water quality. When you have regional benefits that result from significant expenses from individuals, I believe that is where government should help regionalize those costs as well. And we're working our way through trying to develop solutions like that. So there's many more things that are happening. I'm going to turn it over to my fellow speakers here, and I'm very happy to be here and to be part of a group that is working on solutions to this fundamentally important challenge for our region. Thank you.
I think many of you know our next speaker, Supervisor Larry Cantwell. I will give a very brief introduction because there's a couple of highlights here that I knew a couple of them, but not all of them. So, prior to becoming supervisor, Mr. Cantwell served as the village administrator for just over 3 decades at East Hampton Village, and has a tremendous record of service there. Prior to that, I think many folks also know that he had also been on the East Hampton Town Board from 1977 to 1982, and prior to that had, in 1976, served as a Bay Constable for East Hampton Town. The interesting bit that I wanted to share with you is that Mr. Cantwell currently serves as the assistant coach of the White Sox Little League team. So Larry, would you like to sit or stand?
Well, I think I'm going to try to avoid the feedback. I think everyone can hear me okay, right? and I'm old enough where, looking at me is not that great anyway. And yeah, I mean, the beauty of Little League is, I played Little League in Amagansett where I grew up. I coached Little League in Amagansett where I grew up. And now I'm an assistant coach for my grandchildren who are playing Little League. That's the beauty of living in the small.
He wants to know your record.
My record. A winning record. A winning record. So, Jeremy touched on this, and I think it's a good preface, though, to repeat. East Hampton, for decades, my guess would be at least 40 years, has been a leader in land use planning and in zoning, and in land preservation. The purchase of open space. We have large lot zoning, clearing restrictions over our water recharge areas to protect our aquifer and our groundwater, the place where our drinking water comes from. We have zoning that's designed to protect fragile areas around our harbors and bays and wetlands. And indeed, East Hampton's been a leader in open space preservation, as Jeremy said. Throughout the town of East Hampton, over 40% of the land area has been preserved. And in Montauk, indeed, 70% of the land area has been preserved. I remember going back 30, 40 years ago when there wasn't a lot of money running around to buy open space, but there were in those days a few dollars in the federal government and in the state government. And every time, there was some funding available, East Hampton went, yeah, we'll take it. We want to preserve land. I guess the rest is history, except along came the community preservation program, which, in East Hampton has realized over $250 million since its origination in order to preserve open space. And yet, this summer there were toxic algal blooms in Wainscott Pond, in Georgia Pond, in Hook Pond, and in Fort Pond. We know we have hotspots on the south end of Lake Montauk and also in Coonsfoot Cove. And we have them on the north side of Accabonac in Springs, on the south end of 3 Mile Harbor in Springs, and in Northwest Creek. So despite all the efforts that have been made, and I think overall we're probably in much better shape than many other communities because of the efforts that have been made here to protect the environment, we still face, a very serious challenge. And I talk about nitrogen just for a bit. That's certainly one of the principal problems that we have. I mean, the town is fortunate, again, in that we have completed a comprehensive wastewater study, which has identified, almost every septic system in town and identified, several thousand of failing septic systems. And we know that those failing septic systems, certainly in surface waters, are contributing nitrogen and are, probably the primary source of the problems that we're having, both in our ponds as well as, in our marine waters. So, one of the things we need to do is focus, laser focus on this issue of nitrogen contamination. And I have a view about this, and I'll tell you what it is. I think part of the solution here is we need to take a look at the regulatory regime that we have with respect to septic systems and septic waste. The truth is, whether you look at the standards of the federal government or the state health department or the county, that regulatory regime has failed in many ways. That's really the hard truth of it. And I'm not blaming anybody for that, certainly. And we need to find a way to accelerate the replacement of these failing septic systems. We certainly need the new technology, and I applaud the county executive for pushing hard and motivating the health department to find new septic systems and treatment systems that can be used, on individual properties that will remove much larger percentages of nitrogen than our existing septic systems do. But we also need to find a way to encourage people, and maybe in some cases find new trigger points that will require the replacement of septic systems. I'll give you one example. It might be at the time a house is sold, like the CPF program, in critical environmental areas around our harbors and bays, we need to evaluate whether or not a septic system that's failing and polluting, should be replaced. We also need to look at trying to find ways to provide incentives for people to replace those. I mean, the underground fuel tank program that was promoted by Suffolk County, to accelerate the replacement of potential leaching of harmful gasolines and fuels into our groundwater was very successful. And we need to model a program, I think, after that. But we also are going to need some funding source in order to, I think, help some people accomplish that. And that's something that we need to focus our attention on. We're different than other parts of Suffolk County, where you have higher density development on the western end of Suffolk County and large scale sewer systems and sewage treatment plants might be the best solution. Out here, the best solution is going to be to upgrade our individual septic systems on individual properties. There may be some exceptions to that, the downtown Montauk area, in a few other areas, we might need to look at community systems, because in the downtown area, for example, Montauk, you have high density development already exists. There's very little flexibility given the development pattern to replace septic systems, because in most cases the building sizes are very large. So that's an alternative that we are currently looking at. It's very expensive, and it may not be affordable. And funding is certainly an important part of the issue that has to be resolved here. But protecting our groundwater and our surface waters has got to be one of the most important priorities that we have as a community, and we're all going to be challenged to do our part.
Thank you. Supervisor Holst is currently serving in her third term as the Southampton Town Supervisor. Previously, she had served, I believe it was 2 years, as a member of Southampton's Town Board. It has been an interesting time in Southampton. There have been several major projects dealing with both water quality and coastal resiliency that have unfolded before the town during her tenure. Three things that I will mention for you in particular is, and I hope Anna either now or in the course of the dialogue going forward will address these for us. Southampton Town was instrumental in creating special taxing districts that funded beach nourishment projects, several of them, but in particular in Bridgehampton and Sagaponack. And I think those are a tool that we should think about and discuss for our needs out here. In addition, the town, under the supervisor's leadership, issued a sustainability plan, and I will leave it to the supervisor to describe to you what that is. And finally, I don't know how long you've been working on it, Anna, but it has been a dream that is realized that the Center for Clean Water and Technology, which is something that the county executive was referring to earlier, has been funded to the tune of $4 million. So $3 million from New York State and $1 million from, I guess it's the Bloomberg Foundation, if I have that right, that goes into really trying to address clean water and water quality issues, and frankly water treatment issues, through research and a think tank model that will be housed in Stony Brook University. So with that, Supervisor.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming out. And I think that, well, the first thing I want to say is I apologize for forgetting to put my tie on. And I have not coached Little League in Amagansett, but I did coach roller hockey in Amagansett. That was a long time ago. And I think the important thing to recognize here is that you're seeing all levels of government coalescing around this issue today. And I think that that speaks to just the recognition that every level of government has, that this is a prime issue for so many reasons. I like to say that out here the environment is the economy and the economy is the the environment, and it's that simple. And our economy will fail if our environment fails, and vice versa. And that in some ways is a good thing, because I think back in the day, those of us who cared about the environment were, called tree huggers and granola eaters and all those good names, and kind of dismissed as a secondary priority, and economic development and the otherwise bottom line was seen as priority, and today there's a recognition that those two go very much hand in hand. So I think that has changed the discourse on this in a way too bad, because it just goes to show that it has deteriorated to the point where we are now all having to talk about it. On the other hand, we have some very good history in this country of when we have technology and otherwise crisis, we coalesce around them and we achieve results that way. And I'll talk about that in terms of the inspiration for the Water Center. But if we talk about it on a very regional level here, and Southampton in particular, I think one of the things that we all realized very recently is that planning was not good enough in the way that we had looked at it. Upzoning, rezoning, all of that was supposed to be the sort of panacea for overdevelopment and how we treated the build out, and we now understand that certainly is not sufficient. And so we have to look at planning, and planning not only in terms of dealing with density, dealing with the impact on the environment, but also now dealing in terms of resilience. And I will say, as you pointed out, this is my 6 year as supervisor, and I thought that this was maybe going to be the named storm to finish out, because there has not been a year in my supervisorhood that we have not had a named storm, be it a winter storm or a tropical storm. And I think that speaks to something. I mean, that is a history that speaks to anyone who denies climate change. Welcome out here to look at it, because climate change is front and central here. And Steve likes to say that he is a politician, I'll say public servant, that is not a climate change denier and that believes in science, and I like to quote him on that. And I think you're looking at public servants who believe in science and believe that science is important here. And it's important in showing us what we're dealing with, but it's also important in solving these problems. We started imposing FEMA building standards back in the 80s in Southampton, and that was part of the reason that we didn't have more destruction to homes and some of the commercial establishments, was because so many of our homes were in fact built to FEMA standards already. Today, this is new to a lot of coastal communities that they have to build to that. And so I think that back in the day, and there was a lot of pushback then, this was asking too much, but we saw the advantage of that. We went a little bit further. In my first term as councilwoman, I called for the institution of these sustainable building codes, that with the goal of creating as close to net zero as we could. And that also included looking at how homes were dealt with septics. And then we look at things like wastewater management. How are we dealing with that? How are we dealing with runoff? Runoff is a huge issue in our communities here, as has been identified. We were audited by the EPA recently, and that sent a shudder down everyone's, what was that going to bring? It's a very comprehensive audit, but we actually passed it with more than flying colors, and we have a great Department of Public Works to thank for that. We have preserved over 3,900 acres through the Community Preservation Fund in the town of Southampton. And that's something that I think we should be proud of. That's a lot of acres. It's, thanks to Sutherland Hill and several others who had the courage to fight to get the Community Preservation Fund put in place. And some of you will remember, to some of us that was a no-brainer. To many others it seemed like an overreach of government. But today we see the advantage of that. We are working on the LWRP, a local waterfront revitalization plan, and I want to credit Councilwoman Fleming for leading the charge on that. We're getting some pushback on it. These are important planning tools that look at our realities as we know them today in terms of resiliency and climate change. And yes, we did undertake the erosion control district, and I'll talk about that just briefly, but interestingly enough, I had a couple of homeowners, beachfront homeowners, come to see me when I had first been elected supervisor and said, we kid you not, we're in our third decade of imploring this town board to consider letting us tax ourselves to create a beach renourishment taxing district. We'll pay for it. We just want sand pumped up in front of our houses so that our houses are not threatened by erosion. It seemed awfully odd to me that was actually the history here. So we started looking into it, and that was in fact the history there. And I'm going to move forward here. It took 3 years to do it, but we created 2 erosion control districts, 141 homes total in these 2 districts. And we got the town board that had resisted it for several years in the aftermath of Sandy, when these houses were actually threatened, to go ahead and vote for this. So we undertook a $26 million beach renourishment project, 2 million cubic yards of sand. Was dredged about a mile out and put back up on the sand. And if you go and see those beaches that start then from the Sagaponic-Wainscott town line to the end of Flying Point and the beginning of Southampton Village, you will see that those beaches look like the ones that we used to see here 40, 50 years ago. And the naysayers, I think, have come to understand that even though we haven't had a named storm since, we've had several nor'easters and whatnot, and that coastline has held out beautifully. So it is definitely something to consider. And then we have our ponds, and we too are dealing with that. And I will just say this because we've gone through looking at Mill Pond, where we undertook what I thought was, I call it the Tinkerbell Stardust Project, where we were convinced that we should throw a product called Foslock in there, and that was magically going to get the pond to get clear again. Stay away from the too good to be true products because they don't work. So what do we have? We have exactly what's been identified here. We have an issue with our single and separate cesspool and septic systems. They simply cannot manage our build out. They cannot manage the effluents, which is, as you might know, the politically correct word for what we flush down. And they are 70 to 80% of the culprit for why we're seeing the algae blooms, we're seeing the nitrogen loading. Chris Goldberg at Stony Brook has been at the forefront of collecting all this data, and we've had the good fortune of having him right here in our community and helping inform us. So anyone who's been front and center on this knows there have been any number of forums anyone could attend over the last several years talking about what a crisis this is. So my frustration with that was, okay, we know what the issue is, we know there's a crisis. What can we do about it? And we worked with the county executive on this, and what could we do? We could start mapping and trying to really understand where was this coming from, where was it going, and what was it exactly doing at different waterways. And understanding then that there were probably a smorgasbord of solutions that were needed there. And then we worked again with the state and the county with the idea that we would create an incubator, research and development center, and it ended up being awarded to Stony Brook, which will serve, I call it the Silicon Valley of wastewater technology, and where they will be researching, and I'm losing my fabulous Chief of Staff, Jen Garvey. She's going to be the director of it starting in 2 weeks, and it's opening up a store, and it will be the attraction for everyone working on wastewater technology worldwide as a center to bring their know-how and their resources on it, and hopefully we will crack that nut.
Great. Thank you. And I I was remiss earlier, I did not acknowledge Mark Woolley, I don't know if he's still here, but he is here as an observer from Congressman Lee Zeldin's office. So we do truly have, all the layers of government.
And he's the Yankees fan.
Yeah.
Go Mets.
Boo.
Okay. All right, so I want to, we got a little bit of a late start. I want to ask the county executive, can you hang with us for about 15 or 20 minutes past 5? Okay, great. So that'll give us our full 2 hours. So from here, I've got a series of questions that I'd like to ask addressing both of these issues, the coastal resiliency and the water quality. But I want to preserve a big chunk of the time we've got left for all of you who've come out on this beautiful day to have a chance to get your questions on the table as well. So I want to start, Mr. Ballone, with what's sort of a question that we ask a lot out here, and that is, look, something like 85% of the population of Suffolk County lives in the 5 West End towns as opposed to the 5 East End towns. Our reality out here is different. Of the 1,000 miles of shoreline that is in Suffolk County, over 100 of it is in East Hampton town. So what I'm leading up to, without being too cheeky, is how is it even possible for you guys to get it? We are a fundamentally different place out here. The rules are different, the predominant norms are different, the desired outcomes a lot of times are different, and the solutions are different. So, going back 30 years, or not even 30 years, less than that, the gentleman immediately to your right advocated for something called Peconic County. And I think that there's probably a lot of people in the room who feel like that's a good idea. But that's not the reality we currently have. So how is it possible for us out here with 15% of the population and 2/3 of the land to really work in partnership with the county in a way that gets us the solutions that are very different from the solutions that are needed up west?
Right, so, it's a good question. How does, kid born in Queens and growing up in North Babylon, get what's going on out here in a way that is going to help us move forward? Well, I would say this. It is a style of governance. I tell people I go around the state what an extraordinary place the county is, and what makes it so special is many different things, but it's certainly what this place is out here on the East End. It is unique and it is special all on its own. And I remember coming out, running for the office and meeting with farmers and going out with Jay and meeting with officials out here and hearing for the first time the term Up Islander. And I pretty quickly figured it out that it's not a compliment. What I believe in governing is that, first of all, I'm a former town supervisor, so I believe in understanding the importance of local governance. I also believe that the county's role should be looking at the whole in our region and identifying the things that we need to do collectively as a region that impact every community and every family within that region. And the county should be supporting those efforts that are necessary at the local level. So if you look at the comprehensive plan we put together, the water quality plan, all of those were done with interaction and input and collaboration with all the local communities. I don't believe in, you'd never see me as county executive coming into a local community saying, you must do this, you have to do this. It is, we are here to support your local planning efforts. We should be here to provide resources for those efforts. If those efforts result in plans that have an impact on the things that matter to all of us in the county should be here to provide resources to help implement those things. So that's been my approach to government. I think over the last 4 years, I've not paid attention. I'm not looking at the numbers here, how many voters are out here versus how many voters are there. I'm looking at this county as a whole, and what is the right thing to do? What are the things that we need to do to help move us all forward? And I'm gonna work and support those initiatives.
So as a follow-on to that, and I'll ask you all to take this question down the table, looking at the water quality issues for a moment, we've heard a lot of good described in this conversation so far. The county health department today, under your administration, County Executive Balone, is, I would describe it as rebounding from significant staff cuts of 25% under the prior administration. My personal opinion is we're not there yet, and at some point I'll ask you to share a thought on that. But the notion is that we have at the county level, and then as Supervisor Holst described, we have thought creatively. We have looked at this problem and said what we have done up until now does not work. We know there's a problem. The problem with that answer is that the solutions that we are describing from my perspective are either at or just over the horizon. So when we talk about continuing to investigate alternative treatment systems, when we talk about things like new research institutes that are looking at technology that is not yet available to the market, we are looking at a world that in a best case scenario may be better in 5 years, but probably is better in 10 years. And so I want to ask a very specific question, which is that, from the local municipal level, getting back to a point that Supervisor Cantwell made earlier, why would we not, at the local level, take on a greater burden? Why would we not take on a greater responsibility in trying to address these problems over 5 to 10 years? And I'll give you one simple example. In East Hampton Town, going back to the early to mid-1980s, there was a gentleman named Jim Cavanaugh. And his position with the town of East Hampton was to serve as a septic inspector. So, just like you have the full responsibility now at the county to go out and look in the hole and make sure that things were hooked up correctly, that standards were being met, all of that burden now falls to Suffolk County. Why not go back to the model of 30 years ago where the town of East Hampton had an employee who was duly deputized by the county to go out and do this? The reality is that as of this Monday, there were 197 applications that were the backlog on the desk just inside the front door at the county health department, and the folks behind the counter said, it's going to take us a while to get to these. And if the things that are holding us up are things that can be solved and have historically been solved by local authority, why wouldn't we go there?
So I'm open to any solution that makes sense. What I would say is, look, the infrastructure is not yet in place, and Larry was touching on this. There's a lot of stuff that has to come into play to make this thing work. First, you need to have obviously approved advanced systems. We don't have that yet. We are working very aggressively towards that goal. We send our entire water quality team on a tour of the eastern seaboard, looking at what similarly situated communities are doing all up and down the East Coast. I was 5 minutes late, so I missed the bus. I didn't get to go on the septic tour. Jay, did you go on that? No, Jay didn't go on. But they went around the whole East Coast and they were doing that. So we got to approve advanced systems, right? But then it's not enough to approve advanced systems. People have to be able to afford to install them, because I'm not going to compel people to install something that is going to benefit the entire region that they simply can't afford to put in. So we have to, and I talked about this before, we have to have programs in place, and Larry mentioned this as well, we have to have programs in place that will make sense and allow people to adopt this infrastructure in a way that this is not going to bust their family income and make it impossible for them to even operate their home. Larry was talking about point of sale also, that the architecture you put in place where you would say, okay, when you sell the home, you have to upgrade the septic system. Big problem with septic systems, of course, people don't know anything about them. When you go to buy a home, you know how old the roof is, you know how old the boiler is in the house, you ask questions on it, you have an inspector that checks it out. No one looks at the septic system. It's a system, it's a mechanical system in your home that is very important, but it is buried underground, so no one pays attention to it, no one thinks about it. And it's like any mechanical system, has a useful lifespan, 20, 25 years, something like that. So we have all these failing systems all over the place. So there's literally no architecture in place to deal with that issue. So, and then of course what's happening at Stony Brook University with the effort that Anna led, developing new technology so we can actually lower the cost. That is a little more down the line. But I think what we're working on right now is getting the advanced system set up, getting some sort of program in place that would make it make sense for people. Figuring out the funding for that is going to be very important. And then you could look, I think, at potentially down the line, looking at point of sale requirements at first to say that's when we would do. But I would not at all in any way support or feel comfortable compelling people to do something without having the infrastructure in place for it to make sense. And the last thing I would say, we need the contractor infrastructure in place as well. So we have contractors that are very familiar with our septics and cesspools. They know how to fix them, they know how to pump them, they know everything about them, because they've been working on the same systems for decades. Guess what? All these other systems, just like these new cars that are all just basically giant computers, and mechanics that we learn how to fix these cars. Our contractor infrastructure needs to be in place, because we can't compel, certainly, a homeowner to install a system that you don't have the contractor base out in the community to fix it. Because then when you put in a system that's already expensive, no one can fix it, it's going to be extraordinarily expensive to service it. So all of that, what I would call the architecture of this, needs to be put in place, and we're working on all aspects of that at the same time.
Supervisor Kimball?
Yeah, it's frustrating, I think, for all of us, because, as I said earlier, we're seeing, the impacts of legacy systems and legacy issues, whether it's fertilization or phosphorus or nitrogen. And we're alarmed by it. I think East Hampton and the people that live are alarmed by it because of all that we've tried to do to prevent that from happening. So we're anxious to make progress. The county executive is right. It's a question of you've got to have the system, and you've got to have, as I said before, some regulatory regime, and then you have to have the funding. One of the opportunities that our community is going to have, and I don't want to let Suffolk County off the hook here, because as much as we want to do things, for ourselves, and I think have been successful, and maybe that's, a sign of our vigorous independence out here on the South Fork and our support of Pocahontas County and the like. By the same token, we share some of these issues with the county, and we always have to be concerned that we're going to get sort of our fair share of solutions and funding, if you will. But, next fall, there will be a proposition on the ballot to extend the community preservation program. That bill was, sponsored by Senator Laval and Assemblyman Thiel. I don't think it's been signed by the governor yet, but it's awaiting his signature. And that's going to extend the CPF program for another 10 years or whatever the schedule is. And included in that legislation for the first time will be an opportunity for the voters to decide, if placed on the ballot by the town, whether or not you want to use up to 20% of community preservation funds in the future for water quality improvements. Again, it kind of separates us out from the county in that we have this wonderful CPF program that every town on the East End voted for and supported overwhelmingly. And it's an opportunity for us, to some extent, to strike out on our own, We have a technical committee working on our water quality committee that's putting together a plan, and we hope we'll have a plan in place by early spring. That's going to come up with a scenario whereby we can aggressively pursue the replacement of septic systems. That likely will form the basis for educating the community about what that plan is, and give the voters of this community an opportunity to decide next November whether or not you want to use a portion of CPF funds for water quality improvements, because that'll give us some funding source, which is part of the three legs here. We need the technology, and we need to do everything we can to encourage the county and the health department to move as quickly as possible to find the technology that we need to take nitrogen out of our wastewater. And obviously it's complicated, and the county executive is right. How much is it going to cost? How much of a burden is it going to be? Those are important factors. Then we need some regulatory regime that's going to require, under certain conditions, or at least accelerate the requirement that you replace or upgrade your septic system. And that could be done, cooperatively with the county, or we could have an agreement that maybe the East End towns do something more innovative, as we have sometimes in the past.
More innovative than the county.
Now, that's not that hard.
Yes. I know it well.
You walked into that one.
I set them up.
Supervisor Trumbull.
And by the way, let me just add, Larry's absolutely right when he says, and I totally agree, the county should not be let off the hook. Absolutely not. We are all in this together, and the county should play the role in that process.
I think your original question, Jeremy, was what is the county and the health department moving fast enough, have enough boots on the ground? Should we be farming that out, maybe out on a regional level? The duties of the health department